Well, hello. Welcome back to my channel. Just Shauna here to talk about a friggin' book. The book in question, as you can tell from the title, is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This book was actually published in 1995, if I remember correctly, and republished in 2022. Again, if memory serves me correctly. My tablet is taking forever to load, so I can't look at that detail right at the moment. This is definitely literary fiction. It is speculative, dystopian, yeah, post-apocalyptic, question mark. Apparently I have to go get my fucking laptop because this thing sucks. I can't remember where I first saw this book or heard about this book. I didn't tag it as having seen it on any particular booktuber video. I am barely on Bookstagram, so I know I didn't see it there. I'm not on TikTok at all, so I'm not on BookTok, so I know I didn't see it there. I think I might have just seen it like from the library where it's like things like what you've been reading or popular, like one of those like little lists, little curated lists, I think from the library, maybe, or maybe from Storygraph and their lists, similar types of things. I'm not really sure. And yeah, it's getting a resurgence though. I'm pretty sure it's popular right now on TikTok and shit, I think. I don't know. It has a shit ton of ratings. And I quite enjoyed this, surprisingly, I feel. It was not what I was expecting, for sure. I went into it not really knowing anything other than that it was literary and that it's dystopian and it's like a world where there's no men for some reason. And there's elements to the story that were kind of frustrating, or not even to the story. I guess to the story. The overall book in general, there's definitely some things that are frustrating, but it was so thought-provoking and incredibly engaging despite really nothing happening, basically, without spoiling anything. I listened to this on audio from the library. This is one of the books that I had put in a hold request on Libby. I put it in for the ebook and the audiobook, and I don't think they actually had a physical copy, so I had put it in for those and I was waiting for over a month, and finally the audiobook came in first, so I listened to that, and honestly, you all know, if you've been here before, that audiobooks are not usually my jam. I don't do a lot of audiobook reading, listening, simply because I read mostly fantasy, and I can get lost in the sauce. My brain does not like stick to paying attention with just hearing the audio usually. So I can really only do it if I'm like walking on the treadmill or if I'm at the gym, like walking on the stair climber. And sometimes if I'm like doing dishes or folding laundry, like very, very thoughtless activities like that. Or in the car sometimes, but I barely go anywhere. I don't walk on the treadmill all that much, so I just, even when I am engaged with an audiobook, it's very rare that I carve out time to choose to listen to the audiobook. Do you know what I'm saying? Usually it's like, oh, I have to do dishes. Oh yeah, I am listening to an audiobook. Let me pop that on, I guess. But it's this, with this book, I found myself being like, I want to listen to it some more. I don't really have anything to do, but I'm just gonna like put it on and color or something, or putter around the house. Like I wanted to be listening to it. So the summary for this one, I believe this is just from the synopsis on Storygraph. Deep underground, 39 women are kept in isolation in a cage. Above ground, a world awaits. Has it been abandoned? Devastated by a virus? Watched over by guards, the women have no memory of how they got there, no notation of time, and only vague recollections of their lives before. But as the burn of electric light merges day into night and numberless years pass, a young girl, the 40th prisoner, sits alone and outcast in the corner. Soon she will show herself to be the key to the others' escape and survival in the strange world that awaits them above ground. The woman who will never know men. This little baby. Can you go sit in the chair, maybe? Do you just want me to hold you? So if you are a reader who can enjoy definitely something speculative, very introspective, literary fiction dealing with questions of humanity, and if you can enjoy a book with no like real plot and no real answers to the big questions the book presents, then this is the book for you. I thought the writing was very compelling, incredibly thought-provoking. Like I said, I couldn't put it down, and it's very philosophical in nature. Our main character that we're following, who does not have a name, all the other women just refer to her as the child, because she was the only one who was a child when they all woke up here in this cage. She is very much like a thinking type of person, and her thoughts are fucking fascinating, and it creates thoughts within ourselves of like, it's just philosophizing about all these things. And it was, again, very compelling. That is the word of the day for this book. And I will just refer to the main character as the child throughout the rest of this. She was just fascinating. Her character brought in the question of what would a human be? Who would a human be if they didn't grow up in any kind of civilization, society, or even in a free community? They are kept in this cage at all times. They believe themselves to be underground. They never see daylight. There's no windows, doors. There's 3 guards all the time that interchange. They, go on shifts, never speak to them, never acknowledge them. They literally ignore them unless the women do anything they're not supposed to do, which is basically they're not allowed to touch each other. They're not allowed to off themselves. So if the guards see them doing anything that looks sus like that, they will crack a whip. And they did whip some of the women in the earlier years, so they all kind of have that trauma and remembering it, but they really don't actually whip anyone at this point when the story starts. And at the point the story starts, the child is roughly maybe 13 years old, they think, like around there. They don't really know. And they get 2 meals a day. And the lights are always on. They do dim the lights when they're supposed to go to sleep. They have a little mattress that they sleep on. They're given fabric, but they have to use their hair to create like thread. There's just a latrine in the middle. There's no privacy whatsoever. You're just in this cage with these 40 women hanging out day in and day out. I definitely saw the child as somewhat of an unreliable narrator. She says different things at different times. Like at one point she says that she never forgot anything when she was awake versus her dreams when she was sleeping. However, earlier in the book, she explicitly says that she doesn't remember all the details. She doesn't remember this and that and the other thing. But then later she's like, when I'm awake, I never forget anything. But wait, you've told me before that you do forget things. And that's normal to forget things. And I also noticed, and I tried to go back to see, and I'm correct, it said that they cannot touch each other. And this is said multiple times. It is like a hard and fast rule they have. They can't hug each other and whatever. Because of this, the child has an aversion to touch for sure. So we know that they cannot touch each other. But at one point, an older woman who is talking to the child calls over 2 other women to come help her up. And it just says she called them over to help her up. And then those 2 women like talked to the child a little bit after they helped her up. But I was like, how could they help her up without touching her? Because they don't have like tools and stuff. So that also, I was like, is that the child being an unreliable narrator here? But it was fascinating to be in her head. It's very much a stream of consciousness. It's like 160 some pages. And I mean, I listened to it on audio, but from what I saw in reviews after I read it, that if you're reading the physical copy, it's just like one long thing. There's not like chapter breaks or anything like that. But I found this stream of consciousness narrative of her life to be really interesting. I think overall, it just made it a very solid, makes you wonder kind of story. With the plot and the pacing, again, there isn't really a plot. Part of the child's experience, and she says this several times throughout the story, is that nothing has ever happened to her. And I feel like that was really reflected in the narrative of the story. Like, she just hasn't had experiences in life. Even socially, the 39 other women kind of ignore her, and they almost seem to have some kind of resentment toward her, and just confusion and almost like fear of like, what does it mean that she's here? Because she's the only one who was a child, and they just don't understand why she's there. they don't understand why they are there either, but like her being there adds another question that they don't have an answer to, and they don't want to teach her anything because they see it as, what's the point? We are clearly never getting out of here. No one ever interacts with us. We're gonna all just get old and die. What's the point of teaching you anything about anything? And they don't want to talk about their past lives, what they can remember of their past lives, because it's too painful. And again, they just think, why tell you about the world you could have lived in? You're never going to live in it. So why bother? Despite there being like not a lot actually happening in the story, I found it so engaging. There's so many mysteries. There's so many questions. Huge questions. I definitely thought it was going to piss me off a lot more than it did, because that is another thing I did know about this. I had seen like a blurb of someone, a very short review that was non-spoilery at all, and they just said like something about not getting answers to the questions, and like you don't really know. So I did know that going into it, that I wasn't going to get answers to at least something. You don't really get answers to anything. And it didn't, I don't know, it didn't really piss me off. I thought I was going to be angry about it by the end because I'm such a curious person. I need to know. And it was like kind of frustrating to not like know for sure the answers to these questions, but that's kind of the point of the book. I found myself wondering if I would want to continue living if I was in this situation. I'm gonna get into some, I don't want to say spoilers because again, like nothing really happens, but there is one thing that happens throughout the plot, throughout the story. So I do want to, and I mean, I guess it's not too much of a spoiler because it's essentially heavily foreshadowed to or spoiled in the very beginning of the book. But if you just, I mean, if you want to go into it knowing nothing, probably you're not watching this video. But there is a point where, I won't give details about it, I guess, but they do get out of this bunker. It is a bunker. And they do get out of it, and it's like, clearly, after time, after exploring, they realize it's completely abandoned, this whole planet, and it's not Earth, and ain't nobody else there. And yeah, if I realize I'm on this completely abandoned planet, and especially being the child, she realizes like all these other women are gonna die, they're gonna get old and they're gonna die, and I'm going to be alone at some point. Because even when they are out of the bunker, there are other bunkers that they find also abandoned, or, well, the women in the cages are all dead, but they have enough supplies. So, like, for food, and there's clean water on this planet, but it's a very weird planet with hardly any trees or anything, and, like, hardly any water, but, like, it's just little streams that are very shallow. But so she knows, like, I'm not gonna starve to death, so I'm just gonna die of old age too, probably, unless I get sick, but, like, they don't really seem to get like colds and stuff, but a lot of the women do seem to have some kind of cancer that they get. But yeah, knowing you're gonna just you're already in this weird ass situation with no answers, you don't know why the hell you're here, and then you're gonna be alone for decades, and yeah, just like, would you want to even, like, what's the point, you know? But that's partly what the book is exploring. Hopefulness stemming from curiosity and a desire for more knowledge. I just wonder if my desire for knowledge would have run out sooner than the child's, though. I think probably. And she notices the elation that she feels when she learns something new. Again, she is someone who has never had anything happen to her and has never been taught anything, has barely been told anything about anything. So it's a very noticeable difference for her to feel that mental stimulation from learning something new. I feel like it's something that we take for granted, that she definitely did not take for granted. And so just to me, the point of the book wasn't the why behind it all. It begs the question why. It presents a lot of questions of why. Why are we here? How do we get here? How and why and what and when and what in the future and everything. It has these questions, but the point of it isn't the answers to the questions. The point is the value in even asking the questions, even if you don't get useful knowledge from it. And like the child wanting to know things about the previous world, wanting to know things about menstruation, even though she didn't menstruate. things like that, she always was making the argument of like, knowledge for the sake of knowledge, you know? And that was definitely like, to me, the biggest theme I saw running through it was just knowledge for the sake of knowledge, just to know things. And just curiosity and the value of thought and the value of thinking and how much that makes us human. Pondering things being like a big part of our core humanity. And companionship versus solitude, kind of both of these things separately, but also with each other. And a little bit like just the absurdity of it all and the absurdity of life and survival for the sake of survival and just kind of the absurdity of life in general. Why are we doing any of this? You know? A couple of quotes that I wrote down that I liked. One of the times where the child is asking someone something and they're like, one of the women, and they're like, why bother telling you? Who cares? What's the point? And she says, because I want to know. Sometimes you can use what you know, but that's not what counts most. I want to know everything there is to know. Not because it's any use, but for the pleasure of knowing. And now I demand that you teach me everything you know, even if I will never be able to use it. And that right there is just like the core of it. And then she's talking about this story that she has written down, her story. And she's talking about like existing on and like dying. But will she really die if she writes this down? And she says, if that person comes, they will read them, and I will have a time in their mind. They will have my thoughts in them. The reader and I thus mingled will constitute something living that will not be me because I will be dead, and will not be that person as they were before reading, because my story added to their mind will then become part of their thinking. I will only be truly dead if nobody ever comes. Thought that was very, very cool. Definitely content warnings for confinement and kidnapping, probably. Being snatched up out of your life, at any rate. Death, moderate warning for that, I would say, as well as suicide. And also, like, a minor content warning for cancer, because again, they think it's cancer that they're dying from, but they don't really know for sure. One of them used to be a nurse, or was studying to be a nurse or something, so she's like, it seems like it's probably cancer. And even though it's not the point of it, I did want to talk about the theories behind it just for fun. My initial theory for the why definitely had something to do with aliens taking them to some different planet or simply taking over Earth. Once they got out of the bunker, it was clear that they weren't on Earth. I thought maybe it was just some crazy-ass government program until we heard the women's recollections about what happened. The chaos of, like, being taken from their homes. Some of them just, like, talked about, like, loud noises, maybe explosions, bombs. But I got some vibes of them being studied or intentionally kept alive for, like, some future purpose, for sure. Because, yeah, they're fed 2 meals a day. They're not allowed to touch each other, to harm themselves. So they want to keep them alive. But then they also realize that they're on weird clocks. Like, they're not following a regular 24-hour clock. So, like, their bedtime varies, and it's just seems very random, and there's no, like, real answer for it, and they don't have any, like, menstrual products at all either. So I went online and, like, went on Reddit looking for other people's theories, and my favorite one I've seen online, it's from Reddit user special_seaweed_2067. I will link to, like, the Reddit thread if anyone's read this or reads it and wants to check it out. So my favorite theory from this user is, it's much longer, but the paraphrase version is, intelligent non-humanoid aliens captured humans kind of for the hell of it, just like their own curiosity, which I think makes sense, again, for the thematic element of the story as well, like curiosity, right? And that they planned to terraform this empty planet and keep the humans in bunkers until the planet was ready, and then use them to breed and populate the planet. Because they do find bunkers with men dead in the cages as well. But the inhumanity of how they were treated wasn't necessarily out of malicious intent from this alien species. It was because they didn't fully understand the needs of the human spirit. Like, that they needed to dance and have community and freedom and joy and hobbies and things like that. And that's why they had the basic provisions to keep them healthy and alive. and why they didn't have like menstrual products either. They didn't understand that these women would need that. So rather than stemming from anything malicious, it was just their ignorance that humans need more than just regular meals and water and sleep to actually thrive. And there's a lot more to it from them as well. And a lot of theories are also that like there was some kind of bureaucratic snafu or something happened where they stopped terraforming the planet before they could finish this little project and snatched most everybody away other than the people in the cages and then these guards. But then something happens when the guards leave and our group of women are just lucky enough to like have the key in the door and are able to get out. But we don't know what happens there either. And I'm not real sure about that. But again, it doesn't matter. It's just fun to like think about, you know? So there we have it. I who have never known men. I definitely would recommend if you can get down with some literary fiction, kind of dystopian, stream of consciousness narrative. It's very fascinating, in my opinion, so I would recommend. If you have read this, let me know what your thoughts are, if you have any different theories. Again, that's not really the point of the book, but it's just kind of fun to think about and talk about. And if you found anything different in the thematic elements of it, anything that stuck out to you or any of your favorite quotes, let me know in the comments below. Or you can leave an emoji to say hey, to let me know you watched. Also appreciated. As always, thank you so much for your time. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.